Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi here. Hi Anthony Orr, I know you were on earlier today, and yeah, we got a chilly Sunday coming, yes, there's good news for those of us in the East after we get hit with that chilly air on Sunday. Mystery Gamer, Dio Nandkumar, 99 Wolves 17, Delvin, 4519, all on board this evening. We're at a time of year where I don't know, I guess folks are probably a little bit less interested in weather on a day-to-day basis. We don't have any snowstorms to look ahead to, really, and we don't have any tropical storms or hurricanes. It's too early for that. And the severe weather has been actually kind of minimal. So, at the end of the day, we still have weather to look at, and if you're a young forecaster, this is actually a really good time to pay extra attention so that, you know, you get into the flow of things. And, you know, at times when the weather is quiet, you can look around and see what's going on and maybe pick up on something that might happen down the road or not. I don't really see too many big clues going into the long range at this point, but the short range, however, does show a lot of volatility here in the East for the next 5 days or so, but particularly starting tomorrow and going into Sunday. And I'm going to bring up the upper air and show you just how busy the jet stream pattern actually is for this time of year. It's a fairly amplified look, and what I've done is each one of these red lines constitutes a shortwave trough, and if you notice that there's actually 5 of them that you can pick out in this view, which is for 2 a.m. Friday morning. So this is basically 8 hours from now. And you have the one that's in the upper right corner, where that is exiting now. This is yesterday's system that moved up into the east, and then I have labeled as number 2 system that is now moving through the Tennessee Valley and the southeast, and there's a bit of a kicker shortwave behind it that's kind of moving it along, and then 2 weaker shortwaves in the northern part there going up into the western lakes and on up into Canada, just south of Lake Winnipeg. Now, these are all going to be players in one degree or another through the next 3 or 4 days. And notice that out in the west, you've got a big ridge that's built up in the Rockies. And as we go into Sunday, what ultimately is going to happen here, actually I should leave this up full so I can just change the frame. So give me 1 second. But as we go into Sunday, we are going to see a rather deep shortwave trough in the eastern part of the United States. That last shortwave that I had, number 5, really amplifies. And by the way, this was something that the long range picked up on about 8 or 9 days ago and hasn't really backed off much from this. But this is a very chilly, unstable air mass that's coming into the northeast and northern mid-Atlantic states for Sunday. I would not be surprised if we see snow showers that extend maybe as far south as the Catskills, maybe touching parts of northern Pennsylvania, certainly up into central New York State. I think you're going to see some snow shower activity, and maybe even into parts of western New England. The other thing is that there might be some isolated showers and maybe even some, I'm going to take a shot here, that the air is so cold and unstable that there might be some low-top thunderstorms that develop in a few places, and maybe somebody sees some hail. Nothing would shock me, I guess. But the other thing that this is doing is, as deep as that trough is, it also reflects the strength of the ridge behind it. And there's a big ridge, the one from the Rockies, now moves into the plains. And as that ridge builds, we're seeing an increase in the amount of warmer air that will be pushing into the eastern part of the United States beginning on Tuesday of next week. Actually, we'll start to taste a little bit of it on Monday, but Sunday's going to be a day where there are going to be areas that are not going to get out of the 30s in parts of upstate New York, and at least down in my neck of the woods, we're going to see highs only in the 50s, with some places not too far north and west seeing temperatures not out of the 40s. But at the end of the day, this is all going to wind up in a good spot, I think, for the middle part of next week, as we see temperatures head up into the 80s. And in fact, even for coastal areas, the sea breeze will be kept at bay, which is a good thing. Matteo De Fiore, ciao bello, from Garden City, ciao bello back. Good to see somebody using their Italian. That is a good thing. I used to speak it actually almost exclusively until I was about 5 years old. Didn't really speak very much English. My parents were both immigrants. So Italian was really more my first language than English was. And it's always been there in the back of my brain somewhere. So every once in a while, when pushed, it does come to the forefront. All right, so on to severe weather, which there's not too much of. We do have actually some activity going on the radar tonight with some strong thunderstorms moving across central Georgia, western South Carolina, and western North Carolina, where the Storm Prediction Center has a marginal risk of severe weather indicated. But that's really about it. The amount of severe weather that we've seen this spring has not been very much at all. I think I mentioned yesterday there have only been 22 severe thunderstorm watches that have been issued during the since the severe storm season has begun, and that is a fairly low number. I think there have actually been a few more tornado watches. If I remember correctly, the number is 27. So I still haven't. I didn't get a chance to see how that compares to normal. But that's something that I think I'm going to look at when I have some time over the weekend. I want to bring up the risk for days 4 through 8 because it looks like on day 7, the Storm Prediction Center is actually already, I'm sorry, on day 6, which is, I'm going to try to follow this on the timeline. That's sometime early next week. So day 6 showing a 15% risk of severe weather in the Central Plains west of the Mississippi River here. So that's a pretty high number to show this early in the game. So there's probably a lot of confidence from the Storm Prediction Center that that could be an important severe weather outbreak sometime next week. But we'll get there in 6 days. So I would think that would probably be next Tuesday or Wednesday. Meanwhile, just to show you how little is going on the warnings map from the Weather Service, you've got frost advisories up in the blue and a few spots with red flag warnings. Still some flood watches up in northern Maine with some flood advisories, and really not that much else happening. Just very, very quiet. Even in the area where we're seeing the marginal risk of severe weather, at least as of 6:10 Eastern time, we don't see any severe thunderstorm watches. We also don't see any local severe thunderstorm warnings that are up. So it's a fairly tame evening that we're seeing. Now, let me show you on the surface map here what we got, and you can see these. I pointed out on that upper air all those the systems, and you've got the lead system from yesterday that's moving up into eastern Canada. Broke complex low pressure back over the Tennessee Valley in southeast. This moves up the coast on Friday with an area of rain that looks, and some heavy downpours that looks like it could last about 6 hours or so. So if you're anywhere from, say from Virginia, northeastern Virginia, on up through southern New England, when the rain starts for you, at about 6 or 7 hours, and that'll be about the end time. It looks pretty consistent as it moves up the coast. So for my area, it's basically from mid to late morning, lasting until late afternoon or early evening. And that takes care of our Friday. We'll probably have a bit of an onshore flow, which will hold the temperatures down. And then you could look up at the Great Lakes, and you could see the next system dropping southward. And from this, we're going to get this deep trough that's going to develop in the east on Sunday and bring some very chilly temperatures. And if you look in the west, there's not a whole lot happening in the west, but if you look at the surface, the way it's set up with high pressure up in Wyoming and the low pressure down in Arizona, that's kind of like that thermal low that develops as you get deep into the spring and eventually into summer. So it has that warm, a rather warm look to it in the southwestern part of the U.S. So the radar at this time, about the only spot where we're seeing any real activity is up in northern Maine, where we've got the flood watches up, and of course in that area where we showed you the severe weather risk across the southeast with this upper air disturbance that's about to make the turn and move up east of the Appalachians. Otherwise, if you look elsewhere, there's very little happening. Some scattered showers in parts of Oklahoma, some scattered showers up in the Great Lakes, up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and that is it. So we're talking quiet here. So the models are fairly consistent with the look over the next week or so. I really don't see anything, too major, if you want to use that as a way to describe it. It just, I think the big thing is going to be the fact that we're going to see these fast changes over the next 4 days or so, where we're going to see temperatures bouncing around and then eventually heading higher. But here's our surface map on the GFS tonight, and that low that moves up the east coast tomorrow, it's weak. It's hard to find. The surface low actually opens up a bit as it moves up the coast. Then on Saturday, and you see that high that is coming down west of James Bay, that is the strong upper air trough that's swinging into the northeast, and that might create a couple of showers late Saturday into Saturday night. And then once that front goes through is that shot of really cool air for Sunday, and you can see the snow showers that the GFS produces late in the day in parts of northern Pennsylvania and up into central New York State. That might be a bit underdone as far as what it's showing in terms of coverage. I think there might be some a little bit further east and south. So don't be too surprised that even into Monday, you're still seeing it as the cold pool of air is right overhead along the coast. Meanwhile, the isobars from Texas to Minnesota are coming from the south. So there's your warm air advecting northward. You've got some precipitation going on in parts of the plains. Just backtracking, we do have something coming in to the Pacific Northwest later Friday night into Saturday, and that kind of translates up into low pressure in western South Dakota by early Tuesday of next week. And this is where we're starting to see that risk for severe weather that the Storm Prediction Center was talking about for on day 6. So that would be next Wednesday. Meanwhile, here in the east, big high off the east coast, southwest to west winds, this warm up. That's what this is. And temperatures probably getting into in at least the 70s on Tuesday and into the 80s Wednesday and Thursday before this next cold front moves on through. And I'm going to go back one run, because the new run of the GFS is actually doing a little bit more with this low in the southwest, because if we look at the current run, it actually is producing, this is on day 6, next Wednesday, with low pressure in southern Colorado and rain and snow into Colorado and parts of northern Arizona, southern Utah, northern New Mexico, with some rain showers. That's on the new run, but the prior run really didn't do much with that. So I'm going to be a little bit suspicious until we get some continuity. But as we go through the second half of next week, the risk for severe weather increases in the middle Mississippi Valley and back through the southern plains. That I think is going to be consistent in this model run as well. And then we've got this cold front that moves through to the east along about Friday, so that'll bring some cooler air around next weekend, but nothing especially cool. I think we're just going to see the overall pattern evolve into seasonal conditions. The overall jet stream pattern going forward is, to me, kind of starting to look like it, I guess it's starting to look like something a bit more resembling mid-spring, if you want to put it in those terms. We don't have any real blocking going on, so that at least would mean that weather systems will be permitted to move from west to east without too many obstacles, although they may not necessarily be doing it all that fast. But you can see how the big ridge that builds into the east, followed by a trough lake next week that lifts up and out, and then you've got just short waves that are running around, but there's no real blocking in the atmosphere to displace the jet stream further south. So as long as that's the case, we will have our share of nice weather days, and we will have our share of not so nice weather days, but the not so nice weather days will, last for at most a day or so, and maybe we can separate those with stretches of several days where the weather is reasonably decent. When we look at what's going on across Europe, it's a bit more of an active jet stream pattern, at least initially. A big ridge builds up in Siberia, you see it there, so that's allowing shortwave troughs and strong upper air disturbances to dive into Western Europe and keeping things probably cooler than average. Then the flow kind of splits as we go later in the forecast period. You've got a ridge, an east-west ridge from the Atlantic across Europe, with activity going on down in the Mediterranean and a fast westerly flow that sets up from Scotland and Norway and Sweden northward across northern Russia. So you start to see weather systems basically moving further north, but again, the flow is split. So if you're sitting in the middle of that, you're in pretty good shape. But if you're on either side, you might have things a bit problematic. So with respect to the surface features, we can see a bit of a storm there moving into a gale center, looks like, moving into the English Channel and weakening as it moves eastward. And you start to get lower pressures dropping down into Spain and Portugal, and rain into parts of Western Europe. But much of that lifts northward, so you do have large stretches there where the weather's pretty dry, and the model does actually develop a fairly strong cyclone there in the Mediterranean Sea along about day 6. That's a 987 low that's sitting in the Mediterranean south of Sardinia, and you can see it here. It sits there for a few days, and meanwhile that split flow puts high pressure in the middle, storms in the North Atlantic going by well to the north and west of England and Scotland, so you kind of get just occasionally brushed with some rain showers that sweep in with weather fronts, and that's just about it. So I'm going to be watching that system in the Mediterranean. That looks pretty interesting as we go into next week, and see if we can get some model consistency as far as figuring out what that's going to do and where that is going. So let me come back to you guys on the chat board. I hope everybody's had a great day. The weather out here in the eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England area today was really, really nice, and I hope you got to spend some time, in the outdoors, because it's important this time of year to do that. You don't want to be stuck indoors all day long. I'm down kind of in a basement here in a building where our studios are, and I make it a point to head outside. Robert Russo. I did not catch any fish in my 3-day trip, but my buddy Howie did. He caught 3 browns. Phil did not. My friend John did not. But we, all 4 of us, had a great time. I honestly, the way I look at it is, if I catch a fish while I'm fishing, it's a bonus for me. I just really enjoyed where I was, which was up in Riverton, Connecticut. If anyone is ever interested in a spot that they've never been to, I would strongly recommend it. It's a beautiful area of Connecticut, very rural, very clean, undeveloped. The river is just as pristine a river as you can find, and people there, the fishermen are serious fishermen, so they make sure they leave things the way they find it, and for the next group that's coming. So I definitely would recommend it. Delaware should cool back down after the ridge into the low 70s average this time of year. Yeah, Blorox Cleach. I like that name. I think that once we get through next week, that we are going to see maybe something that we don't see too often, and that is perhaps a stretch of seasonal seasonal weather and seasonal temperatures. Let's see, low 60s on the Weather Channel's 10-day forecast is just fake news after the ridge goes away. Oh, very good, Blorox Cleach. I like that. James NASCAR, good to see you. Low 60s for Franklin Taylor. How things in Arkansas? You're 12 below normal. This is gonna finish in a lot of areas. They're gonna wind up seeing this April falling in the top 10 coldest Aprils when the numbers come out next week. I feel pretty confident about that. Timothy Veltman, I just had your comment. There we go. Kind of cloudy, cool, and damp up where you are. Oh, I had to talk to academic advisor. Decided to go back to college online for my bachelor's degree. Good for you. Awesome. Good for you. Chad Crawford, weather will miss me, so I think I'll go fishing. Oh, by all means. Looks sunny for a week, then I'll kick back. Okay, sounds like a plan. And that's exactly what I plan to do next week with this warm weather and sunshine. I think I'm going to spend the mornings fishing nearby where I live before I have to go into work. Let's see. 60 to 70 mile an hour winds in Georgia, bringing lots of damage. Happened on April 22nd. The whole week was insane, crazy on the high winds as well. I'm trying to think back. 22nd was Sunday, so that was last week. It all gets kind of muddled in my brain, but we did have that the storm with the big rain, so and the wind. I do recall that. So you wish they had a Bass Pro Shop in my area. I took the Bridgeport ferry home, and there's a huge Bass Pro Shop that sits very close to where you board the ferry. I did not have time to go in, but I made a mental note of it so that the next time I go up fishing in Connecticut and I come back down and take the ferry home, that is where I'm going to stop. John Trabacchino, cloudy and chilly in northern Williamstown, Mass. at 47. Yeah, we're in the upper 60s to near 70 today. Even the sea breeze, the sea breeze had no chance to come in, so even the coastal areas did really well with plenty of sunshine. And you might see some snow showers out of this on Sunday up your way, John, so don't be too shocked, or some grapple, or maybe if you get a low-top thunderstorm, you might get some hail. Are cold air masses colder in the southern hemisphere? The cold air masses that come from Antarctica and move into Argentina are cold. They also extend that cold does come up into parts of southern Australia during their winter time, but the land masses are a bit smaller than ours, and I think from the standpoint of the numbers that you see in terms of temperatures, you see bigger extremes here in the northern hemisphere than you do in the south. The cold air masses that make it as far north as, remember, we're going now from Antarctica, so we're saying the cold air, moving northward, it gets into Chile, Argentina, and on up into southern areas of Brazil. They have frosts there, and occasionally they do see snow, especially in the mountainous areas. But the northern hemisphere cold is different. The air masses, as Timothy just points out, air masses are tempered by the oceans to an even larger degree than they are up our way. We have more land spanning across the top of the globe and less ocean than they do in the southern hemisphere. But very good question. We don't get too many questions, and we don't get to look at what the weather is like in the southern hemisphere too often. That's another thing on the list to learn. Franklin Taylor, go to the Bass Pro Shop in Springfield, Missouri, the original sometimes. I know there's one in Allentown that has the restaurant in there with the exotic foods. We'll call them, quote, exotic foods. Maybe they're exotic to some people. They're not exotic to me. But I would like to do that one day and go go take a look and sample some of the different foods. Because over my lifetime, I mean, I've had boar, I've had venison, of course deer. I love deer hot dogs. My God, I got those in New Hampshire. I bought some deer hot dogs. They were the best hot dogs I ever had. Deer sausage, excellent. I've had alligator, rattlesnake, Trying to think. A few other things. Armadillo. I've had that. So I've kind of had the, I've spanned it there in terms of food. I lived in South Texas for a while and in Louisiana. So, you're going to have unusual foods to sample there, and they are quite good. But I really want to get my hands on deer hot dogs because they were just utterly amazing. Very low in fat and tasted absolutely terrific. And Anthony Orr, can a tropical storm form in water of 24C? Not talking about a you mean start from scratch? I think it would probably be more subtropical in nature, although I could seem to recall a few storms, a few hybrids that developed in the 70s that eventually, that started out in marginal water temperatures and then eventually drifted far enough south where the water got over water temperatures that were higher. Plus, sometimes you get some baroclinic stuff going on, so they may not necessarily be truly tropical. On the other hand, they may also not necessarily be purely extratropical. So, that's kind of marginal borderline there, Anthony. Oh, no problem, Israel. I really, enjoy when the good questions come. It's fun. It challenges my own brain to answer. And I haven't been to Cabela's. I have gotten stuff from them, but I haven't been to Cabela's. But that's another one that's on my let's call it my to-do list. All right, folks. Coming up on 6:30 Eastern Time. Let's call it a day at this point, and save it for another time when we have some really active weather going on. We'll have the Joe and Joe Show tonight on Facebook at 9:15. So, by all means, join me on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi, or on Joe Rayo's Facebook page, Joe Rayo Weather. And, of course, I've got website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com. You can check those out. Angry Ben has got the latest nycweathernow.com, and my other website is weatherlongisland.com for all the latest goings on with regards to local weather on, you guessed it, Long Island. So have a great evening. We will see you at 6 o'clock on Friday.